To wrap up our discussion of Ontario and other Canadian wines, we will discuss the food culture in Canada and explore some of the main considerations for service and storage of these wines. Would you believe that North Americans consume 24% of their meals in their cars? This is a poor reflection of where our society has gone, that we are prepared to devote almost 1/4 of our dining time not with family around a table or with friends and loved ones in a restaurant, but behind the wheel, driving from home to work or work to home or work to work or goodness knows where else. It's time that we Canadians spend more time celebrating the value and importance of the food we put in our bodies and the time and place we make this happen. Watch these 3 videos to get a sense of where much of your food comes from, what the average North American is eating, and while all of this suggests that slowing down and reevaluating the importance of food and its role in our daily lives is so critical. What does local mean to you? Think about this for a moment. What does local actually mean to you? Does it mean Canadian, or does it mean from my own backyard, or something in between? How important is it that we eat local? What benefits are there to eating locally grown and produced foods? One of the oldest rules of wine and food pairing suggests that eating local foods with local wines is the best way to guarantee a great pairing. Think about it for a moment. Why do each of these classic wine and food pairings work so well? Oysters and Chablis, Pauillac lamb and Cabernet Sauvignon, foie gras and Sauterne, Boeuf Bourguignon and red Burgundy, charcuterie and Gamay, spaghetti with meatballs and Chianti Classico, verdicchio and Mediterranean seafood. If it works in France or Italy, why can't it work in Canada? Well, of course it can. We simply need to do a better job of pairing local wines and local foods, and we may use some of these European classics to get an idea. For example, why not have locally produced charcuterie, sausage, prosciutto, etc. with a juicy Ontario Gamay? Why not celebrate the amazing Atlantic coast oysters such as Malbec or Raspberry Point with a crisp, refreshing Tidal Bay wine? What's stopping you from pairing a stunning northern Okanagan Pinot Noir with cedar planked, barbecued wild Pacific salmon? Nothing's stopping you. Presumably, if French wine tastes better with French regional food, then shouldn't Ontario wines taste better with our own wines? I should say, shouldn't Ontario food taste better with our own wines? Here are some examples of what we're growing in Ontario. Look at this short list of amazing locally produced foods and think about an Ontario wine that you might choose to enjoy with each item. How about Lake Erie perch or Lake Erie whitefish with Niagara Chardonnay? Maybe you'd prefer Ontario raised pork with Pinot Noir from Prince Edward County. How about Ontario raised lamb with Cabernet Franc from the 4 Mile Creek appellation of Niagara? And finally, one of the classics, an old Ontario cheddar with Niagara ice wine. If we look at the rest of Canada, obviously we celebrate the seafood that's produced in Nova Scotia and the wonderful light crisp whites produced there. Cheeses, charcuterie, and Euro-inspired foods in Quebec are hugely varied, as is the range of hybrid wine styles that we have access to. When we move west, the Pacific seafood, including wonderful salmon, whether it's coho, sockeye, pink, or something else, halibut in season, sable fish, also known as butterfish, and the range of Pacific oysters can be excellent with BC Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and depending on the sauce, BC Pinot Noir or other light reds. Wild game and Alberta beef might be served with fuller-bodied BC Reds like Syrah or Meritage from the southern Okanagan Valley. Every province has its own selection of stunning local fare. Canada offers a bounty of seafood, river food, game, farmed meats, wild foraged foods, and locally farmed fruits and vegetables, not to mention the many, many excellent chefs and cooks turning these raw materials into exceptional meals. A good example of a local business that celebrates and makes available high-quality Niagara foods is the Niagara Local Food Co-op. Members of this co-op receive baskets of locally raised foods on a regular basis that in many cases were removed from the ground moments before they got to your plate. Isn't that the way food should really be bought and sold? Did you know that in 1780, Kingston, Ontario hosted the first Ontario Farmers Market? That's 1780, almost 100 years before we became a country. Did you know that farmers markets provide the farmer with approximately double the profit than they would earn selling to the local supermarket? Did you know that if each household in Ontario spent just $10 of our grocery money each week on local, we would create $2.4 billion a year for our local food industry? And more, even better news, we can now buy and sell local VQA Ontario wines at farmers markets across the province. What an amazing celebration of local food and wine. After the farmers have worked hard to grow local foods, we need great chefs to work with these products and turn them into fine meals. Some of the original farm-to-table pioneers in the Niagara region include Chef Mark Piccone at Vineland Estates, Chef Michael Olson, who opened the Inn on the 20 in Jordan, Ontario, Chef Tony DeLuca at Hillebrand. Remarkably, but not surprisingly, all three of these chefs now are members of the faculty at Niagara College, the Canadian Food and Wine Institute. Some of the newer restaurants that are also world-class and do an excellent job of showcasing local foods and wines include Treadwell Farm-to-Table Cuisine in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Backhouse Restaurant in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Redstone Restaurant at Redstone Wines, and Peller Estate Winery Restaurant featuring Chef Jason Parsons, one of our most celebrated local chefs. Venture further afield and you'll find that wineries in all major Canadian wine-producing provinces have on-site dining options. This is just a short list of local options. However, there are many, many more out there offering a range of dining options from deluxe high-end experiences at Vineland to more affordable and seasonal offerings on the deck at Creekside Winery. Take a moment to research winery restaurants in some of the other provinces we've discussed in this course, and share your ideas via our discussion forums on Blackboard. Have you been to a winery restaurant in Canada? How was your experience? What wine did you drink? What local foods did you eat? Tell us about it. Even if a winery doesn't have a full-service restaurant on site, you'll find many that have takeout counters, food trucks on site, bakeries, or simple cheese counters. The fact is, the wine industry believes in celebrating local food and wine together, and so should you. The LCBO is a huge proponent of going local and have a significant part of their promotional budget devoted to this promotion. Period 9, every LCBO fiscal calendar is devoted exclusively to Ontario wines and celebrates local foods. Local wineries and food providers are featured throughout the month, and sales of these products soar. For more information, visit this link. A quick recap of the ABCs of food and wine pairing will assist you when you are considering what local wine to enjoy with what local food. Color coding is the simplest of all approaches, but may be too simple an approach for someone looking to elevate their pairing to an even higher level. The basic idea here is that white wines go with white fish, Rosé wines go with pink fish and pink fleshed meats, and red wines go best with red fleshed meats. Next, as mentioned, we've got the regional wine and food pairing approach. Eat a wine that goes with a local food. The single most important thing you look at when making the pairing decision is what part of the food is dominant. For example, you may have a salmon dish with a simple light butter drizzle, or you could have a salmon dish with a sweet and spicy mango salsa. In the first case, we would try to find a wine to pair with salmon, which is really driving the bus. One with adequate body to stand next to a rich fish such as this. In the second circumstance, the salmon is no longer the dominant component, and instead we need to pay attention to the sweetness and spice of the salsa. And it's these flavors that will be most critical to pair with the characteristics of the wine. Ask yourself, what is the overall weight and intensity of the dish? And after you've considered all of these things, decide whether you want to enhance the flavors and textures of the dish with a similar style of wine, also known as complementing, or do you prefer to choose a wine that contrasts, tones down, or counteracts some of the elements of the dish, which is called contrasting? In our example above, if we choose a Pinot Gris with adequate acidity, we'd be contrasting the wine's acidity with the rich oiliness of the fish and fat of the butter. However, in the second salmon recipe, we might choose a medium sweet Gewürztraminer to complement the sweetness of the salsa. If your salmon comes from the Atlantic, choose a Nova Scotia wine. If it comes from the Pacific, choose a BC wine. And if it happens to be an Ontario or Quebec Arctic char or lake trout, you might consider a wine from that province. If we break down the basic flavors of food and wine a little further, we come up with this. Generally speaking, we want to pay attention to acid, bitter, sweet, salt, and umami in our food, and acid, bitter, sweet, and alcohol elements in our wine. A few really critical rules to keep in mind. Ensure the level of acidity in our wine is at least as high or higher than that of our food. Ensure the level of sweetness in our wine is as high or higher than that of our food. Use salt in our food to soften the tannins in our red wines. You may consider pairing bitter foods with bitter wines, as there will be very little buildup of bitterness, and instead the wines can actually taste fruitier and softer. Match aromatic and adequately acidic wines with our umami-rich foods, and try to avoid high levels of alcohol and tannins in the wines we pair to these glutamate-rich foods. If you can stick to these basic rules and take the aforementioned approaches to local wine and food pairing, you'll be well on your way to gastronomic delight. The artisan cheese movement has always been strong in Quebec and is now starting to grow real steam in the other provinces. Most Canadian cheeses are local versions of famous European cheeses, but we have a knack for putting our own spin on the production process and resulting flavors. The link above will take you to the government site that lists quite a few of the certified commercial cheese producers in Canada. It's worth taking a look to see if there's a good cheese producer near you. Locally, in Ontario, we have several dozen excellent craft cheese producers. Here's a very short list of just a few of the better ones. In the heart of the Niagara wine region, we find Upper Canada Cheese Company. It produces a range of excellent fresh, soft, bloomy rind and harder aged cheeses, and even smoked versions from the rare Guernsey breed of cows. The Comfort Cream is one of the finest brie-style cheeses to be found in Canada, and is a really excellent pairing with ripe, fruity Ontario Chardonnay, fuller-bodied off-dry Riesling, or aromatic dry or off-dry whites such as Pinot Gris or Gewürztraminer. Believe it or not only does Canada grow over 90% of the world's mustard, but it's also home to the biggest and oldest mustard mill. Coslex has been making mustard since 1948. Even chocolate is produced locally. Of course, our climate doesn't permit us to grow cocoa beans in Canada, but local chocolatiers such as Donini, Soma, and Hummingbird take the imported chocolate beans and turn them into magical chocolate creations to be enjoyed with sweet, rich, red ice wines. Recently, Hummingbird Chocolatier won an international award for the best chocolate bar in the world. So clearly, we are making first-class chocolate in Canada. One of the great local purveyors to be found in Niagara is Pinguè Prosciutto. This many generations old Italian family is a mainstay in Niagara wine country, and the huge range of high quality and organic cured meats produced by the Pinguè family is second to none. There's nothing better than pairing a fruity local red with a smoky, spicy, or fatty slice of locally cured and aged prosciutto, lonza, capicola, or bresaola. You can even find honey produced locally, and from a winery nonetheless. The Rosewood Winery is also a meadery, and some really excellent honey products can be found year-round, including mead wines. Now, if that isn't a great example of local, seasonal flavor, then I don't know what is. Now that you have a sense of the wines of Ontario and some of the local food options, it may be a good idea to discuss what Ontario wines to age. This decision is never a particularly easy one for someone who isn't an experienced wine professional, but there are a few tricks that you can use to make the decision easier. First and foremost, a wine should be balanced, and tannins and or acid must be balanced with the fruit concentration of the ripeness of the wine. If you feel you've got a rich, old vines wine full of complexity, rich fruit, and the tannins and acid are just a little aggressive, this may be a good candidate for longer-term aging. A simple rule to use to ascertain whether or not a wine wants to age is to see what happens to it in your glass. If the aromas are shy at first but start to emerge after several minutes, and if the wine seems tight and hard on the palate at first but softens and becomes richer in your mouth with time, these two factors might support that this wine could be aged for a few more years in bottle. In general terms, the lighter the wine, the sooner it should be drunk. Heavier, more concentrated whites with adequate acidity and reds with firm tannins might be stored for 3 to 5 years or longer in order to permit them to develop and release their full range of aromas and flavors, and for the structure to come into harmony and balance. Specifically, the best candidates for potential long-term aging include high-quality Riesling, ripe, good vintage Cabernet Franc and Meritage, and select high-acid, balanced, complex ice wines, especially those from Riesling. Once you've chosen which wines to age, you need the proper storage conditions. These include 75% humidity, thereabouts, a range of around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, and a space that is vibration and foreign smell free. If you're storing wines for several years, you simply can't store them in the fridge. The fridge is a dry environment and in fact retrogrades the items that are stored within it. That means it removes moisture in order to extend the shelf life of food. If you're storing wines with corks, they should be laying on their side with their labels up. If you're storing wines with capsules, screw caps or Stelvin, then they can remain standing. The same goes for sparkling wines finished with cork. They are actually okay to be standing because of the deluxe nature of the cork and the capsule closure that's used. If you wanted to come up with makeshift storage conditions at your home because you weren't in a position to install a professional wine cellar or purchase a temperature and humidity controlled wine fridge, then simply look for the northeast corner of the coolest part of your basement. The northeast corner is the coolest typically because it avoids the sun for the longest part of the day. And if you don't feel the basement is adequately humid, especially in the dry winter months, then you can simply put a water bucket with water in that particular space and change it on a regular basis every couple of weeks to make sure no mold grows. This little bit of static humidity will help to keep your wines in good shape for the long term. Finally, you're ready to serve your fine Canadian wines. Some important considerations to always keep in mind. Don't take this advice too lightly, as passing over any one of these recommendations can limit your great wine's ability to fully express its full character and quality. Start with good quality stemware. There are so many excellent crystal manufacturers out there now that prices have come way down. I tell all of my students to invest in 2 or 4 really good wine glasses to enjoy their best wines in. One glass for aromatic light whites and ice wines, a different style of glass for oak Chardonnay and similar full-bodied whites, one for light fruity reds such as Pinot Noir or Gamay, and finally a 4th style of glass for bigger robust reds such as Cabernet Sauvignon or Syrah. Riedel is still one of the very best crystal stemware producers on the planet, and their XL, Heart to Heart, or Venom series glasses are all excellent choices at reasonable prices. Once you've got good glasses, consider whether or not the wines need to be decanted. The main reason we decant is to separate an older red wine from its sediment. However, we may also wish to decant younger, full-bodied reds or complex, high-acid white wines. This aeration mixes oxygen with the wine and volatilizes or releases more of its aromas and flavors, making it all the more enjoyable. Of course, if you're enjoying a bottle of wine over several hours, this aeration will naturally happen in your glass, so decanting may not be necessary. Finally, service temperature is very important. You should serve sparkling wines and ice wines the coldest at roughly 6 to 8 degrees Celsius. Young, crisp white wines might be served at 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. Rich, oaked whites and fruity reds will be served slightly cool between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. Fuller-bodied young reds are typically served at what we call cellar temperature, which is about 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. And mature complex reds will be served at room temperature approaching 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. Now, obviously, it's difficult to have one fridge for each of these wine styles. You can buy wine fridges, professional wine fridges that have multi-zones so that you can keep the coldest wines in one spot, the warmest wines in another spot, and everything in between. And you can also use an ice bucket to chill wines that need chilling. And if they need significant chilling, they can go into ice and water. If they need light chilling, or you just want to maintain their cellar temperature, then simply putting them on top of a few cubes of ice may be enough to maintain that temperature. Remember that wines will warm up in your room at roughly 1 degree Celsius for every 15 or 20 minutes.